Well, this is my second tutorial video. Today we're looking at the business test as applied to Terry and his two activities. Now, some comments first off before I go through the actual question. What was noted by the tutors who are marking your tutorial answers is that a lot of students still don't initialise or underline case names, and that's a bit of a problem, particularly when we come to the exam. You need to note that some of you are not actually quoting the correct legislation, and you are putting sometimes definitions ahead of the actual taxing provisions. So, for example, when you come to talk about the business test, there is one key section that you must mention, which is CB1, because if you don't get caught under CB1, then there is no tax as a business. The other section that virtually nobody talked about, a few of you mentioned ordinary concepts in your answer, but very few people actually referred to CA1 subsection 1, or looking at ordinary income. This becomes relevant particularly when you don't catch it under CB1. You still need to be able to apply ordinary income concept test to the question. And then, of course, the other section that's relevant is YA1, which gives the definition of business. And some of you were giving far too much emphasis to that section and not talking about CB1 or CA1. Why is this all relevant? Well, of course, if one is found to be in a business, then there are deductions that one is entitled to claim under section DA1. So all of those are the key sections to mention in this test and in this question. And of course, the case that is the most relevant is the Grieve case, Grieve and CIR. Now, what we needed to establish under Grieve were to apply the various tests that that case establishes. First of all, looking at the nature of the activity. Well, this would just be a description of whether wood turning and horticulture growing are capable of being commercial. And in both cases, both horticulture and wood turning are capable of being commercial, and therefore both of them could be business operations. Don't get into specifics here, that's all you need to talk about. The second thing that you need to talk about is there an intention to profit? Now, that's more difficult to establish because, as you should all remember, intention is subjective, and it is not easy to establish just by looking at the scenario that's given to you in the case of Terry. We have a couple of stated intentions. One is that he believes it's a hobby. He sees it as a way of meeting people and developing friendships. But we have to look objectively, and this is what's stated in Grieve. You have to look beyond the subjective intention that's stated or may not be stated and look objectively at the facts. So that's where you can apply period of time, scale of operation, commitment of time, money and effort, pattern of activity, financial results, and also the comparison with other activities of a similar nature. I would suggest that you split your answer and compare between the two activities. Now, just on the facts, and this would help a lot when coming to talk about it specifically in the Terry case, the horticulture activity and the wood turning started off by him just selling what he produced at the gate, at the end of his driveway. Now, it's very important to note that for the vegetable growing, he was only selling the surplus. So in other words, he was growing vegetables and fruit, and what he didn't use for himself and for his family, or put in the freezer for later, he was then selling to the public. Now, at no stage did he increase the level of activity for the vegetable growing. The vegetable growing throughout the whole period stays the same. The other important fact to establish is that he gave produce away. Now, commercial growers will also give produce away, but usually it's the waste. It's what's left over, not the stuff that they can sell, not the produce that they can sell, but the produce that is not saleable. Also, the other fact to note is that he would have devoted considerable time and effort to the vegetable growing. Anybody who's had a garden will know that, that growing vegetables is actually incredibly time consuming and does require a lot of effort. And you have to look after your plants. You can't just walk away, put something in the ground and walk away and forget about it. Now, what you need to also remember is that hobbies can take up a considerable time and a lot of money and activity. Think about any of you that might have a hobby of snowboarding or skiing, or do something with paragliding, or even sport, other types of sport. If you belong to a club, there will be costs that you incur that you won't be able to get back from your hobby. Photography, if you buy all the equipment and you do your own printing, again, an expensive hobby. Now, this is where you can bring in some case law, and this was the other comment that was made by several of the tutors, was that there was not enough reference by many of the students to relevant case law. Two cases which I think would have been extremely useful to bring into this discussion are cases F55 and D54. D54, if you recall, was the case about the deer hunter, and he didn't keep any records, so he wasn't able to establish his costs. He also gave produce away, meat away. So that's very similar to the situation here with Terry and his horticulture growing. With case F55, there was no reliance upon the income that he won from prizes, or the money that he won from prizes, and also when his actual mechanical work came into conflict with him going and attending the race, he put his mechanical work, his paid employment first. So that indicated that there was not a quality, it didn't have a quality in his hands, and therefore it wasn't of the same relevance, if you like, as the other activities that he engaged in. That's in case F55. Okay, so those are some facts. Now, some other facts to do with wood carving. He started by selling at the end of his driveway, and then he joined the craft cooperative. Now, when he joined the craft cooperative, even though he stated he did it because he could make friends and it got him out and about, the fact is that once he joined that craft cooperative, the commitment of time, money and effort went up considerably. Also, you need to note that he started buying extra equipment, i.e. the lathe. Now, what did the lathe enable him to do? It enabled him to produce wood-turned articles specifically at the request of customers. Now, that to me indicates someone who has a business-like intention. Clearly, he's targeting the market. He's aware that he has to produce a better finish, a better quality of goods if he is to sell it through the craft market to the public. Again, as I said when I was talking about hobbies, people do devote a considerable amount of time and effort, but what you do need to also examine when you look at the pattern of activity is it systematic? Is it organised? Is it coherent? Does it have business elements to it? And he keeps records. He doesn't keep records for his vegetable growing, remember, he's just selling the surplus of those vegetables or fruit that he grows. But for the wood turning, he keeps accurate records, he knows what he spends, and he knows what his sales are. He's devoting considerable time and effort, and clearly there must be, just on the facts, an intention to profit. He wouldn't be doing this and making these efforts. He wouldn't have bought the extra equipment. He wouldn't be taking time and care over what he produces, and he wouldn't have needed to join the craft cooperative if there wasn't an underlying intention to make profit and to be in business. The only other thing I need to say is that after you've gone through these tests, so the ones that we all know from Grieve, looking at period of time, just should stay. The key thing to note is that the activity had gone on for a number of years. Now, bearing in mind that most businesses can fail within 2 years, the fact that he'd been carrying this activity out over a number of years gives also some evidence to the business. Now, when we come to talk about the vegetable growing or the horticulture side, because of those other factors, i.e. he's only selling surplus, he gives large amounts away, he doesn't keep a record of his costs, clearly in this case we could argue, yes, it looks like a hobby, and hobbies can can go on for years. I mean, someone can play sport for 10, 15 years. Someone can be a photographer all their life. So hobbies can carry on for long periods as well. Now, the last thing that I just was starting to say was that you need to also bear in mind CA1 and look at income under ordinary concepts. So even if he's caught for business under CB1 for the wood turning, and you're arguing that the vegetable growing or the horticulture activity is a hobby, you still have to go on to apply CA1 and look at the fact of whether it's regular, it's recurring, is it periodic, does it have a quality in his hands, does the money come in? In other words, the various other test factors that come out of cases like Dawson, G and the Commissioner, Reed and so forth. So most students forgot to do this. Just because you're not caught under one provision doesn't mean that another tax provision couldn't apply. And it's very important that you all think about that when you come to answer any question that you're given in tax. Okay? Hopefully that's been helpful, and if you've got any other questions, please raise them with your tutors or with your lecturers. Have a good afternoon.